Two of our favorite podcasts are crossing over every 2 weeks. Kate Achille of Up Next at Work and George LaRocque of WorkTech look at the tech, business, and people that impact our HR and WorkTech industry. It's a crosspod with a unique strategic lens on what's happening in our world. Enjoy!
Hey, welcome back to Up Next at WorkTech. Hi, Kate.
Hello, George. How we doing?
Good. Wow, what a couple of weeks.
Never dull, that's for sure.
That's an understatement. I think we've got some updates on some things. We've got continuation of some sagas out there. A lot's happened. I think you were going to kick us off with the first story, an update on Workday, right?
Yes, Workday was back in court about the big age discrimination lawsuit. And, I think the big update was Workday did have a few things dismissed as part of this lawsuit, some things that were related to the California state laws. And I believe an individual plaintiff had one disability discrimination against the company that was dismissed. But the larger issue is that the plaintiffs are going to be allowed to move forward with disparate impact age discrimination claims. So Workday still has a bit of a mess on their hands. And this has to do with the Age Discrimination in Employment Act that this is falling under. So the judge in the case, Judge Rita Lynn, basically said, hey, you guys, you're still in trouble. This is still moving forward. And they're going to be back in court March 27th. So about 10 days out from when we're recording this.
Yeah, it looks like the plaintiffs will file to amend with everything that's come up through her order. So on that date, it's a long process. I think we're going to be, well, I know Workday's fighting this and it, has its own timeline because of that. I can't imagine this is a good thing for Workday to be actually an update on podcasts like ours. Everybody's looking for what's the latest on Workday, especially in light of the everything else happening in the market. We've got other suits and they're sort of the first up. It's not good for their brand.
Yeah, they kind of set the stage for these other issues and lawsuits that are coming up. But I know we're already like 2+ years in, I think, on this one. I know it kind of just hit the mainstream last year, but I think the HR Dive article that I was reading said they've been contesting for over 2 years at this point.
Wow.
So that's a long time and a lot of legal fees.
Yeah.
But there's another legal issue that we have come across, I guess legal, maybe legislative is a better term. And this has to do with data and data brokers, which I don't think we typically think about in this space. But one of the companies in this space, the folks over at Findem, have been named by a U.S. senator, actually, who called them out for how their opt-out page, basically, and whether or not they're actually allowing people to opt out of the use of their data. And so 5 companies were named. Findem is one of them. The other 4 are ComScore, Telesign, 6 Sense, and IQVIA or IQVIA. But Findem is the only one that really fits squarely in the HR tech category. This was interesting to me because it actually came out a few weeks ago and I haven't really seen many people covering it, but it broke in Wired, which is also pretty high profile when you think about it. But Senator Hassan, the one who's been doing this investigation, and this again links to California with their strict basically said that, Findem has not been doing a good job of allowing folks to opt out. The data deletion instructions, I guess, are hard to find. The page has been hard to find. There was a statistic that I read that said from Hassan's report, mandatory disclosures from the company, in this case Findem, in 2024 show that it did not process 80% of privacy requests from individuals. That's a staggering amount.
Hassan is from, I know that the California study that was done, but Hassan's from New Hampshire. So it's, to be called out by a senator and for this to be getting that high exposure, not, speaking of brands, not good for that brand. It has to do with, it reminds me of the Eightfold case in a way, because it has to do with privacy, right? It has to do with, you said it when we were talking about this earlier, it has to do with us having some level of control over our data. And I think, we know Findem as a sourcing tool, a candidate
Mhm.
sourcing tool, but they fall into this data broker category because they're essentially selling the data that they compile.
That they just
Yeah.
so
And we're supposed to be able to say, no, I opt out. I opt out of you selling my profile, I guess. And that's so it's confusing because I think because people they're helping you find what I thought was all publicly available data. That's a question that I have. Is there anything here that isn't just out there for everyone to discover? I don't know if Findem listens to us, but I would encourage them to say, make a statement about it and clarify this.
yeah, yeah, because as of and I mean, again, the coverage I'm looking at is it's a couple weeks old at this point, but as of the articles that I've read, Findem had not made any statement and they had not responded to Senator Hassan's requests either. It looked like they had just kind of quietly removed their page so that it was, it remained available in Google, but it wasn't showing up really their privacy policy and other things. It looked like they were working on them. But again, this is something that people would like to have control over. I think some of this goes back a long time in the US. I mentioned while we were chatting before this, like can spam and the do not call list. This is something we've struggled with in the US for a long time of how do we control our information. And obviously in the AI era, that's getting more and more unwieldy for a lot of
Yeah.
us, especially, we talk about deep fakes and fraud and all these things, but for the real live humans who want to know who has what and who's saying what, it's important that we have easy access to opt out when we so choose, or
Yeah.
at least
And,
know
and
what the process looks like.
yeah, and it's not a lawsuit, but I can't help but think that this coverage could open them up to a lawsuit. And that's why it reminds me the Eightfold case is about the Fair Credit Reporting Act and about a profile being built by an employer without
Hmm.
someone in the hiring processes, without their knowledge of that, and how that is then used to make a judgment for employment in this case. So it's related in the sense that I'm a consumer and I don't have control over my data, and you're compiling it in my mind anyhow. It seems like they're leaving the doors that it seems that they could address this with Congress and close the door, or at least protect themselves better from being the next class action lawsuit in our space.
Otherwise, this landscape is going to look very different pretty soon with all these
It's-
lawsuits.
which is the lawsuits are coming. I think, there are infractions, right? Or there are people who feel like there have been, and they're validating, or they're trying to address that when it comes to privacy and discrimination. And there's a real fear of AI. This is my
Hmm.
segue to the recent study by, of all institutions, a very conservative institution, the Brookings Institute, which is the study is all about AI and its impact on work, and a very conservative leaning institute has called for. Basically, they're saying there are two types of AI being built right now. The type that's going to be put into place and slowly replace all the humans, and the type that is going to empower the humans. And everybody's building the first kind, and not a lot of people building the latter. So they're recommending more of the human-centered approach. And our friend Lance Hahn
Hmm.
called out this. I don't know if you saw that this week. Called out that a bunch of the big tech firms have donated to support unionization, and which makes you think, I don't get this. Like, you fought against it for so long, and it's because it's bad for business. And not that they're reacting to the Brookings Institute, but there is skepticism around AI, and even conservative think tanks are calling it out. And without regulation, I think we're going to get this confusing. We're going to be in this confusing state for a while. But that was interesting to me that Brookings came out, and I think a lot of us were like, wait, is it the Brookings Institute? And it is.
It is. It is. Yeah. No, I mean, that's really interesting. I think we've seen a lot of AI studies coming out. So the way Brookings broke it down, I think is actually helpful to companies that are developing AI tools. Obviously, more and more of these studies are starting to pop up. One that I saw last week, the American Institutes for Research is launching what they're calling an AI century study. They are going to start to look at how it's shaping families starting now and like trace it for the next 100 years. I mean, I kind of disagree with them here. They think that this is going to be the first generation that's going to be the AI, like starting now. I think that kind of already has happened. So, agree to disagree there. But, they're looking at like cognition and learning, health and well-being, skills and work trajectories. Like they're going to be looking at all the things too. But we're not going to be here in 100 years, you and I. We don't know what we don't know what that one's going to say. So long-term opportunity, I mean, yeah, that's great, but we need right now to look a little different. So I think the Brookings Institute, albeit, they have their leanings, is at least offering some helpful guidance, especially since I also think the World Health Organization recently put out some stats on, water and how quickly we are going to run out of it at the rate of AI development. So I believe they said we're all going to be in water conservation mode here in the next like 5 years at the rate of AI development.
We'll be forced into it.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
guess.
So Brookings might be onto something essentially with, let's focus on the good humankind of AI
Right. Right.
versus the bad humankind. Which brings us over to our friends at Moltbook, who
Yeah.
got acquired, which is funny because you and I have been talking about them since they got invented, essentially, since they're less than 2 months old. And
Keep giving us stories to talk
they keep
about. They keep,
giving us stories, and they got acquired by Mark Zuckerberg and the team at Meta. But the larger story is here that Moltbook is owned by OpenClaw. Really, I guess OpenClaw or Moltbook. It says Moltbook is joining the Meta Super Intelligence Labs. So that's interesting that Meta wants that to study
yeah.
because there's a rumor going around that they're going to cut 20% of their headcount, which Meta has 80,000 employees. So why they need a network of AI agents talking to each other when they have real humans they could be taking care of?
Yeah. And
Very
it's a rumor that's being written about. So I mean,
Oh,
it is
everywhere. Yeah.
it's a
Fortune.
documented.
It's a very documented and, it was in Reuters. It was, tons of different places. I don't believe any warrant acts have been filed at this point, but it is called out. The company has been spending heavily to acquire AI startups. Because Moltbook isn't the only one. They also acquired Manus recently, which is AI agents for task automation. So is Meta going to become one of the first companies that's all agents? Is that where they're heading? Zuckerberg
It's
is, he is a disruptor.
yeah. Well, he's a disruptor, and I guess this is exactly how he does it. They after Facebook, they haven't. His disruption has been more like acquiring Instagram, acquiring WhatsApp, so this falls right in line with that. The layoff thing is a challenge for me. This is at a really big scale. But last week, Bach, which is
Dorsey.
founder, yeah, Jack Dorsey, they laid off a big percentage of their workforce, but a smaller number, like 4,000 people. And it was immediately afterward, they blamed it on AI. That's the thing to do these days. But then there were all these employees coming out of it was largely in their engineering group, and it's published out there. They were saying this isn't really about AI, but this had to happen. There were so many people doing the same work. It was a really inefficient organization. They were saying, this wasn't a surprise that they were laid off because it was not a well run. They were still living in a growth at all cost environment, and then the world
Hmm.
has changed. So it's a AI has given everyone or given these CEOs, I should say, the opportunity to mask some things. I'm sure that some of these layoffs you could attribute to some automation and redundancy with AI, but I can't see, we acquire
40%.
we
That
acquire
was Block
multiple.
was Block was 40% of their staff.
Okay. I mean, we acquire and Meta, we acquire Moltbook today, and immediately there's a rumor we're laying off what 20% or what have you. It's just not. I and Moltbook. Let's go back to the last time we were talking about them. 30,000 um, security infractions within from OpenClaw. And it's just, it's, that's, you don't acquire, like, I think acquiring like that, an acquisition like that needs to go to a company who can put some rigor around it. And it's an amazing technology and they need to get some rails on it, but it doesn't seem ready to replace 40% of your workforce if it's got those types of issues for an environment like Meta. So
Well, and Meta is such the problem with a company like Meta doing such a big layoff and block is then it sets the stage for other companies is
yeah,
also my fear. Atlassian did a layoff last week too. I think that was 1,600 people. These are all stacking up really quickly. And, we're not seeing, there's no response to the AI layoffs. There's no one saying, okay, but, it's helping us create these jobs. All we're hearing is we're laying off because of AI. We're not hearing, well, but the AI is creating this new category of jobs, or in response to that, it's just that it's a dead end story. And that's what I find really frustrating.
yeah. And it has, like, Uber was in the news this week. Their CEO was saying that while automation is going, or no, I'm sorry, not Uber, Waymo. There was an article about Uber, it was different, but the CEO of Waymo was saying that they'll still have people changing tires and working on the cars. And I was thinking, well, your
For
analysts
now.
are, well, but they like it's like it's a shell game. Like, let's not talk about the white collar jobs. Let's talk about the blue collar jobs. I think it's great that blue collar jobs will, for now, have some stability. But if robots can build a car, they can change a tire. It's,
There's also the pay differential. Blue collar jobs do not
right.
pay what white collar jobs pay. And given inflation and given the cost of living right now, blue collar jobs, nothing wrong with them, but are you going to be able to survive on what they're going to pay for those positions? Unless they're going to start paying $250,000 a Waymo to have somebody changing the tires, which I don't think they're going to do. So that's, another part of this that we have to figure out. And on that note, that brings us over to the CEO of ServiceNow, giving
Yeah.
us, as we approach graduation season here for the class of 2026.
Yeah. More good
Not sure.
news.
Yeah, more good news.
Yeah.
30% potential unemployment for which I
For
think
grads. Yeah.
right now they're saying 2025 they put the number at 5.7% for new graduates, recent college graduates.
Right.
That's now we're saying up to 30%. I mean,
Yeah.
these are great recession numbers
And
for.
the Fed, in the article about Bill McDermott is the CEO of ServiceNow. And he has a really good reputation. And you had mentioned that not an alarmist, like he's not somebody who's, usually coming out with clickbait type
Mhm.
headlines. And in that article, they make a point that the Fed has said new graduates also face an underemployment rate of 42.5%, the highest level since 2020. So there's unemployment and underemployment, and it's not a great, that doesn't make a good cocktail from an employment
Again,
perspective.
again, these are
Um,
this is that great recession story again, where you just spent $150,000 on a undergraduate degree, and now you're going to take whatever job you can get, which fine, work is work. It's noble no matter what. However, it's obviously the university system is struggling, graduates are struggling. Like, where's the break? What are we doing to fix some of this? Because it's a lot of talk but no action. Sadly.
yeah, and I think there are many different, stories that could be told. Like, we'll see, to your point, in 100 years when those studies are done. But over the next couple of decades, this could be a story about enablement, empowerment, but it's happening so fast. It's hard for me to see um, the governance that needs to happen to not stifle it, but just help, make this transition something manageable. It's
Mhm.
got to come from outside corporate America. Some direction needs to be provided because it's clearly not going to happen from within. corporate America. It's not happening.
Well, what I think is interesting too is it was so easy to help all these companies return to office because there were incentives to get back into these office spaces that were sitting empty. Where is the incentive to get people back to work? Going back past the Great Recession, let's go back to the Great Depression when, FDR built all these programs and like we built all these programs to help people fix infrastructure and jobs and all these things. Not saying that it was a perfect system. It wasn't. Nothing is. But, perhaps now is a time that we could be thinking along those lines because there is a lot right now that could be done in this country to help people find, or develop new skills outside. We talk about reskilling, we talk about upskilling, we talk about all these things. Maybe that's an option right now.
Yeah.
Because again, the AI story is going to keep moving. And if we're not going to regulate it, then we got to look somewhere else to start to control some of this. And on that note, I guess we can go over to the synergistic world of corporate jargon.
Yeah, in the next episode we'll circle back on these other topics. Yeah, I found this article about Cornell, which I thought we might need something a little lighter. I'm just going to read the headline. Those who circle back and synergize also tend to be crap at their jobs. I think we all kind of knew that at some level. Cornell University researchers pivot to pluck low-hanging fruit to optimize bandwidth. And I like what the writer did there with the jargon as well. But it's basically people who use this jargon tend to make you feel that their work makes you feel just like their jargon does, is how I would sum it up.
I love what they called it, the corporate bullshit receptivity scale. That's great. That's great. Coming out of Cornell, like the fact that, people are unimpressed. Yeah, people, you sound strategic, but you're saying very little is essentially, the bottom line here. We're also conditioned as part of the problem, though. You know what I mean? Anyone who has worked, a desk job for, any length of time, some of this is just horribly ingrained in our brains.
Really is.
You go to a party on a weekend and you're having a casual conversation, and some of this just comes. I catch myself doing it because it just you got to try to break the habit, but and AI is not going to help. I'm just gonna make that point now, because if we were relying on crappy buzzwords and jargon before we were barely using our brains, what's going to happen once we've given our brains over to Claude and Gemini entirely?
And I use AI a lot, and I tend to put a lot in and then have it help me with editing and I find a lot of my pushback on the AI is it's basically, what the hell is this? What is this phrase? Like, where did this come from? And it's, oh, I'm sorry, George, but yeah, okay. Well, it's this kind of jargony BS that I tend to find.
That's
Good
what
point.
It's been taught. We're out here teaching the LLMs how to speak corporate.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, there was some industry news as well to keep the high note going. We had one of the biggest funding rounds from a VC perspective that we've seen in a while. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, this is the folks over at Juicebox, $80 million Series B, and at a valuation of $850 million. And I think one of the reasons this is so massive too right now is, this is on the recruiting side of the space too. So, I mean, given what we're talking about with the job market and all the things that are happening, the fact that Juicebox has built a technology that is appealing enough to garner this sort of interest from investors, I think is really impressive. It says they've got more than 5,000 recruiting teams who are, sourcing through Juicebox at this point.
Yeah, and it is a sourcing tool. I know there's a lot of like top of funnel because it's sourcing automation there, but I can't help but that valuation, right? Like they just didn't want to be $1 billion, I guess. I mean, they didn't want to, they didn't
want to push it the extra 150 million.
The investors are like, let's hold back. Maybe it's not cool right now to be a unicorn. But at that valuation, it's hard for me to see a world where you're just a sourcing tool and you actually grow into that valuation. Since the round was announced, I've looked a couple of times. There's still messaging on the sourcing tool. they have a chart on their website with different hiring platforms, the ATSs and how they integrate. And I think it's clear to me based on their high level language, like they're going to be coming for those ATSs and they're going to have to, or they're going to have to grow out of this. Just like who was the last big one that we had was Mercor, that massive, and it turns out they took their platform and really what they're all about is a marketplace for individuals training LLMs. So they had to grow into a much bigger market, a much bigger TAM. There isn't a big enough TAM for sourcing tools for an $850 million dollar valuation.
Yeah.
So keep your eye on
Yeah.
Juicebox.
Well, and yeah, even it says like in terms of their next chapter, they're obviously a little vague on the product roadmap. It says agents, sequencing, and talent insights.
Yeah.
That's where they're going to be using some of this money. And I know they're young founders too. It's like a really young team, really scrappy and savvy. I did think it was kind of funny though. It says their goal remains simple, and that's to help teams win the talent war. And I can't help but think that the phrase of winning the talent war is probably older than the founders.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Because yeah, that's like 1998, 99, I think McKinsey coined that,
That's
something
exactly
like
it.
90s. And so, I mean, all the best to them because this is really impressive what they've put together here. But
Yeah.
I did think that was kind of funny. Well, I think
All
that
right.
brings us to the end, Rose and Thorn.
Rose and Thorn. Given everything we talked about, AI, job market, new grads, my young adults, literally my young adults, like my children that are young adults. One has found her internship, the other one got a job, at, eh, you know, just off the Rutgers campus. So I'm just feeling like, okay, that's the Rose in all of this there. It was tough for the Rutgers student who's a freshman. So it's a job. That was harder than the UNC student getting access to an internship. I don't know what that tells me. If anything, it's a sample of two, but I felt good about that one. Do we do Rose and Thorn, or do you do your Rose and then we both do our
You can
Thorns?
do your Thorn and then I'll do mine.
Okay. My Thorn is war. It's not just low hanging fruit to keep with our jargony stuff. It is what keeps me up, literally keeps me up at night right now. I hide in my work all day and then I get horrified catching up on the headlines. And I feel like we're all watching this movie that we've watched before, but last time we didn't know we were going into it unwillingly, and this time it's like I don't want to be in this theater. I don't want to be watching this movie. I don't want to be. This is. I don't think anybody is in support of this, and it's bothersome for me. So that's my thorn.
Agreed. That's a very big thorn right now. Well, I will end with two smaller roses and thorns. My rose is I am 2 months out from my next competition, powerlifting competition.
Okay.
So that is going to take me to Corpus Christi. I've never been there before, so if anybody has any recommendations, please send them my way. Not easy to get there from New Jersey, which is surprising. The greater New York City area, it's usually easy to get everywhere, but this
Yeah.
one's not so easy. And then my thorn is we're in March, so we're kicking off conference season, and I guess I got a little FOMO here. So I'm not going to, any of the conferences. So obviously Phenom was last week in Philly. This week is Unleashed out in Vegas. Do feel for all of you folks who are going to be staying for 2 whole weeks in Vegas, though,
Gosh.
to then go to Transform next week. Blessings to all of you. I hope you win big or at least have some good food. I don't know that I would want to be there for the full 2 weeks, but I will be watching from the sidelines here. And then, I think there's other stuff coming up too, like SIA Exec Forum and some other events. So I'll be watching from here.
Well, I'll be at Transform. I won't be at Unleash, so I can let you know how that is. But I'm with you that these events are usually around 3 days, and I'm done. Like when I leave Vegas after the 3 days, I am like, this is not. It just you're on, and it's work, and it just sucks the energy out of you. So yeah, and there are a lot of people doing it. A lot of people that are hunkering down.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I hope everybody has a blast and maybe we'll see some big news come out of both of those. I can imagine we will. And
Yep.
we'll be back soon.
All right.
All
Take care,
right.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to or watching Up Next at WorkTech, brought to you by the Work Defined Podcast Network, the Devon Group, and WorkTech.